Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves.
There's something about working with the dead that changes the way you see things. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once. It's more like a slow shift in what you consider normal. The 5 accounts you're about to hear come from people who worked in morgues, people who thought they understood death. They didn't. None of us do. Let's start with something that might seem small. A temperature reading, a malfunctioning refrigeration unit. Except it wasn't a malfunction, and deep down, the person who experienced it knew that. This one is called the wrong temperature. The thermostat in cold storage unit 7 read 58 degrees. That was wrong. That was 30 degrees warmer than it should have been, and the body inside had been there for less than 4 hours. I'd been working night shift at the county morgue for about 3 years by then. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 4 nights a week. The building was old, built in the 70s, renovated twice, still smelling like formaldehyde and floor wax no matter how much we cleaned. My coworker that night was Derek, a quiet guy who'd been there longer than me and mostly kept to his headphones and his crossword puzzles during downtime. The body in Unit 7 was a John Doe, male, estimated late 50s, found in a drainage ditch off Route 9. No ID, no wallet, nothing. Cause of death was pending autopsy, scheduled for the morning. I'd processed him myself, photographed, tagged, logged into the system, slid him into the refrigeration unit at 10:47 p.m. Standard procedure. At around 2 a.m., the temperature alarm went off. That happened sometimes. The units were old and the compressors would kick out, especially in summer. I walked down the hall to check, and that's when I saw the reading. 58 degrees on Unit 7. I opened the unit to check the seal. The tray slid out smoothly. The body bag was still zipped, but it was warm to the touch. Not room temperature warm. Warm like something alive. I told myself it was the unit malfunction. Heat buildup, insulation failure. I rezipped the bag. I noticed it had been pulled down about 2 inches from where I'd sealed it, and slid the tray back in. Reset the compressor. Logged the malfunction. 20 minutes later, the alarm went off again. Same unit. This time, Derek came with me. We opened it together. The bag was unzipped to the chest. I know that I had zipped it fully. Derek looked at me and I looked at him, and neither of us said anything for a moment. Then Derek said maybe the zipper was faulty, that he'd seen it happen before. I hadn't, but I wanted to believe him. We zipped it up. I used a piece of medical tape across the zipper pull, just to be sure. We went back to the office. The third alarm came at 3:15 a.m. I went alone because Derek said he had paperwork, but I could see his hands were shaking. Unit 7, 58 degrees again. I pulled the tray out. The tape was still in place, still sealed, but through the bag I could feel that the body had shifted. The arms, which I had positioned at the sides during processing, were now crossed over the chest. I could feel them through the vinyl, crossed, like someone had folded them deliberately. I did not open the bag. I slid the tray back in and walked to the office and sat down, and did not go back to that hallway for the rest of the shift. In the morning, when the day crew came in and Dr. Patel performed the autopsy, he estimated the man had been dead for at least 72 hours, not the 12 we'd been told. And there was something else. The man's arms were at his sides, exactly where I'd originally placed them. I never mentioned the crossed arms to anyone except Derek. Derek quit about a month later. I don't think it was just because of that night, but I think that night didn't help. The Unit 7 compressor was replaced that week. It never malfunctioned again, but every time I opened that unit after that, I pressed my hand against the bag first, just to check. It was always cold. It was always still, but I never stopped checking. And sometimes the dead arrive on schedule. You know who's coming, when and why. But every once in a while, the numbers don't add up. And that's where the next story begins. This one is called The Extra Bag, and it's about a night when the morgue received one more body than it should have. We received 9 bodies from a multi-vehicle pileup on I-40. I logged them in myself. 9 bags, 9 toe tags, 9 entries in the intake system. But when I did the morning count at 6 a.m., there were 10. The morgue was chaos that night. A tractor trailer had jackknifed during a rainstorm and caused a chain reaction involving 6 vehicles. Bodies started arriving around midnight. Lisa and I were the only techs on shift, and we had help from 2 paramedic students who were doing their practicum rotation with us. Young kids, maybe 22, both looking like they wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. We worked through the night. Each body had to be photographed, tagged, logged, assigned a unit. The intake paperwork alone took 20 minutes per body when everything went smoothly, and nothing went smoothly that night. The system crashed twice. One of the students, Marcus, had to step outside after the 4th body because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. By 4:30 a.m., all 9 were processed and stored. I double-checked my log against the delivery manifests from the ambulance crews. 9 bodies, 9 units occupied. Lisa signed off on the count and went to take a break. At 6 a.m., I did the standard shift-end count. I walked the cold storage corridor with my clipboard, checking each unit. Occupied, 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 9 in a row, starting from Unit 2 through Unit 10. Unit 11 was occupied. I stopped. Unit 11 had been empty all night. I had walked past it a dozen times. I checked my log. 9 bodies, Units 2 through 10. Nothing assigned to 11. I opened the unit. Inside was a black body bag, same as the others. Standard vinyl, same manufacturer. But there was no toe tag, no intake label on the outside, no paperwork anywhere. I called Lisa back. She came down the hall still holding her coffee, and I watched her face change when I showed her. She checked the system. 9 entries. She counted the occupied units. 10. We opened the bag. Inside was a woman, maybe mid-30s. Brown hair. No visible injuries. No identification. She was cold, properly cold, like she'd been in refrigeration for hours. But she hadn't been there at 4:30 a.m. I would stake anything on that. I had walked that corridor. Unit 11 was empty. We called the supervisor, Ray, at home. He came in within the hour. The assumption was that someone from the ambulance crews had delivered a 10th body, and we'd miscounted in the chaos. It happens, not often, but it happens. Except it didn't happen. Every ambulance crew confirmed 9 bodies transported. The hospital confirmed 9 received at the morgue. The accident scene was cleared, no additional victims. Ray told us to log her as a Jane Doe and move on. We did. The autopsy was performed 2 days later. Cause of death was hypothermia. She had frozen to death, but there was no missing persons report matching her description. No one ever identified her. What still bothers me, is something Lisa mentioned weeks later, almost in passing. She said that when we opened the bag together, she noticed the woman's lips were slightly parted, like she'd been about to say something, and Lisa said she almost leaned closer to listen. She caught herself. She said she didn't know why she almost did that. I didn't tell her that I'd felt the same pull, that when I'd first unzipped that bag, there was a moment, just a fraction of a second, where I thought I heard breathing. Not from the body, from the bag itself, like the vinyl was expanding and contracting. I logged 10 bodies at the end of that shift. The paperwork says 9, and no one has ever been able to account for the difference. And old buildings have sounds. Everyone who works in one knows that. You learn to tune them out. The pipes, the settling, the ventilation ticking on and off at odd hours. But what do you do when the sounds start responding to you? When they have a rhythm that nothing mechanical could produce? The next story goes underground, into a sealed room that hasn't been opened in 30 years. It's called Room 3B. The scratching started about 2 weeks after they moved the overflow storage into the basement. It was faint, so faint that I convinced myself it was the pipes for almost 3 full shifts before I admitted it was coming from inside the walls of Room 3B. Room 3B was a secondary prep room in the basement level of the morgue. It hadn't been used regularly in years because the ventilation down there was poor, and the lighting was the old fluorescent kind that buzzed and flickered. But we'd had a bad winter, flu season, a nursing home fire, a string of fentanyl overdoses in the county, and we ran out of space upstairs. So they brought Room 3B back online, and I pulled a rotation down there every Thursday. The first time I heard it, I was cleaning the drain table after a post-autopsy wash. It was around 3 a.m., and I was alone. The sound was rhythmic. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. Coming from the east wall, behind the steel shelving where we stored extra supplies. gloves, body bags, specimen containers. I moved the shelving. The wall behind it was painted cinder block. No cracks, no holes, no access panels. I pressed my ear against it. The scratching stopped the moment I touched the wall. Started again when I pulled away. I reported it to maintenance. They said it was probably rats in the old ductwork. The building backed up to a wooded lot. Made sense. I accepted it. But the next Thursday it was louder. And it wasn't random. It had a rhythm to it. Scratch, scratch, pause. Always the same cadence. Always from the same section of wall. And now I noticed something else. The temperature near that wall was wrong. The rest of 3B was kept at a steady 64 degrees. Near the east wall, it was in the low 50s. I checked the thermostat, 64, but my skin prickled with cold every time I walked past that wall. The third Thursday, I brought a stethoscope from upstairs. I felt foolish doing it, but I needed to know. I pressed the chest piece against the cinder block and listened. It wasn't scratching. It was tapping, fingernails against stone. I could hear the differentiation clearly through the stethoscope. The slight click of a nail, the drag of a fingertip, the pause. Over and over. Methodical. I pulled up the building blueprints on my phone. Behind the east wall of room 3B, according to the original 1974 plans, was a storage room. Room 3C. But there was no door to 3C. No access point. The renovation in 1991 had sealed it off when they rerouted the plumbing. It had been walled in for over 30 years. I told my supervisor, Helen. She pulled the renovation records. Room 3C had been a cold storage overflow space originally. When they sealed it, they were supposed to have cleared it completely. The records confirmed it was emptied, but Helen made a face when she read the paperwork and said something that I think about constantly. She said the inventory list from the clear-out noted 8 body trays removed, but the original installation order for 3C listed 9. 1 tray was never accounted for. They never opened the walls. I pushed for it. Helen pushed for it. But the county said the cost wasn't justified for a pest control issue, and the building was scheduled for renovation in 2 years anyway. I finished my rotation in 3B the following month. On my last Thursday down there, the scratching was so loud I could hear it from the hallway. Scratch, scratch, pause. And for the first time, there was something else between the taps. A sound I can only describe as a long, slow exhale, like someone pressing their mouth against the other side of the cinder block and breathing out. The renovation finally happened 3 years later. I'd transferred to a different facility by then. I asked Helen if they ever opened the wall. She said she didn't know and changed the subject so fast it was obvious she did know. I never asked again. And there are things that happen in a morgue that have explanations. Gas shifts, muscle contractions, gravity doing strange things to tissue over time. You learn the science. You trust it, but there are moments where the science doesn't help, where you're standing in front of something that shouldn't be happening, and no textbook in the world is going to make it okay. The next story is called The Smiling Man, and I'll be honest, this one is hard to shake. His face wouldn't stay still. That's the only way I can describe it. Every time I looked away and looked back, the expression on the dead man's face had changed, and every change brought it closer to a smile. He came in on a Tuesday afternoon, rare for me since I usually worked nights, but I was covering for Lisa, who was out sick. The body was a male, 71 years old, brought in from a hospice facility. Natural causes, according to the paperwork. Heart failure. No autopsy required, just processing for the funeral home pickup the next morning. His name was Gerald Mart. I remember the name because of what happened. When I unzipped the transport bag, his face was neutral. Eyes closed, mouth in a flat line. Normal. I photographed him, tagged him, began the external examination. Everything routine. I turned to grab a new pair of gloves from the counter. When I turned back, his mouth was different. The corners were turned up just slightly. Not a smile, more like the beginning of one. The earliest suggestion. I stared at it for a long time. Rigor mortis can do strange things to facial muscles. Post-mortem gas can shift tissue. I knew this. I had seen hundreds of bodies do unexpected things, but I'd been looking at his face 30 seconds earlier, and it had been flat. I continued processing, noted his personal effects, a wedding ring, a watch, a small wooden cross on a chain. I bagged them separately, labeled everything, turned to log the items in the system. When I looked back, the smile was wider, distinctly a smile now. The lips had pulled back enough to show the edges of his teeth. Upper teeth only. The eyes were still closed. My hands went cold. I stood there for maybe a full minute, just watching. Nothing moved. No twitching, no gas release, no subtle shift. The face was perfectly still, but it was smiling in a way it hadn't been smiling 2 minutes ago. I called Ray on the desk phone, told him I wanted a second tech in the room. He asked why. I said I wasn't comfortable working alone on this one. He sent down Marco, one of the newer guys. Marco came in and immediately noticed. He said, and I remember his exact words, he said, "Why is he smiling like that?" I asked Marco what he meant. He said, "It looks like he's laughing at something." That's kind of messed up. I hadn't told Marco anything. He saw it independently. We finished processing together. I zipped the bag, slid him into Unit 4, closed the door. We went upstairs. Around 8 p.m., I went back to check on the cold storage temperatures. Standard protocol logged every 4 hours. I opened Unit 4 to verify the seal. The bag was zipped. Nothing was disturbed, but through the vinyl, I could see the shape of his face pressing upward against the material. And the shape was wrong. The mouth, the impression of the mouth through the bag was open. Wide open, not slack-jawed. Open like a laugh, like whatever Gerald Mart found funny had reached the punchline while he was lying alone in the dark. I zipped the outer seal and closed the unit and did not open it again. The funeral home picked him up the next morning. I wasn't there for the transfer, my shift ended at 7, but I checked the log later. The funeral director had signed for the body without noting anything unusual. I looked up Gerald Mart's obituary a few days later. It was short, survived by a wife and 2 daughters. Services were held at a chapel in Greenville. The photo they used was from when he was younger, maybe mid-50s. He was smiling in it. The same smile, exactly the same. Lips pulled back, upper teeth showing, eyes crinkled. Except in the obituary photo, it looked warm, friendly. On the slab, in the cold, in the dark, it looked like something else entirely. I don't know what Gerald Mart was smiling at. I don't think I want to. And I've saved this last story for the end, because it's the one that I have the hardest time making sense of. The others, you can argue explanations, equipment failure, miscounts, acoustics, even the smiling man could be rigor mortis if you really want to stretch it. But this last one, there's no explanation. I've found that makes it fit into a world I understand. This is called intake 3347. The body they brought in at 1:14 a.m. on March 7th was mine. I don't mean it was assigned to me. I mean it was me. It had my face, my build, my scar from the bike accident when I was 12, right across the left kneecap. It was wearing the same watch I was wearing. I need to be very precise about what happened because I've gone over this so many times in my head that the details have worn smooth, and I need them to be sharp. I was working alone. Thursday night. Budget cuts had reduced us to single coverage on weeknights, which was technically a violation of protocol, but had been happening for months. The body arrived from the hospital, DOA in the emergency room, brought over by transport. The driver was a guy I didn't recognize, not one of our regulars. He had me sign the manifest, wheeled the gurney inside and left. Didn't say a word beyond confirming the delivery address. The manifest listed the deceased as a John Doe, male, mid-30s, no identification. Found unresponsive in a vehicle on Parker Road. Pronounced dead at 12:48 a.m. I brought the gurney into the intake room and unzipped the bag. I didn't scream. I want to be clear about that. I didn't scream or stumble or drop anything. I just stopped. My hands stopped. My breathing stopped. Everything stopped because the person in the bag was me. Same face, same stubble pattern, same mole on the right side of the neck, hair length, skin tone, the small chip on the front left tooth from when I bit down on a fork wrong in college. Identical. I touched the face. It was cold, stiff, dead for at least an hour, maybe 2. The skin felt exactly like dead skin feels, waxy, dense, wrong. I pressed my fingers into the cheek and felt the resistance of rigor beginning to set. This was a dead body. This was a real dead body. And it was me. I checked the hands. Same calluses, same crooked right pinky from the break in high school that didn't heal straight. And the watch, a Casio digital silver band, scratched face. I looked at my own wrist. Same watch, same scratches. I held them next to each other. Identical, even the time matched. I backed away from the table. I stood in the corner of the intake room for what might have been 5 minutes or might have been 20. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The ventilation hummed. The body lay there on the table with my face pointing at the ceiling. Then I did what I was trained to do. I processed it. I photographed the body. I tagged it intake number 3347. I noted the physical characteristics in the system. I typed the description of distinguishing marks, and I watched myself type words that described my own body. Scar left knee approximately 3 inches, consistent with childhood injury. Mole right anterior neck. Dental irregularity, upper left central incisor. I did not list the watch. I removed it from the body's wrist and put it in my pocket. I don't know why I did that. I just couldn't leave it there. I slid the body into Unit 12 and closed the door. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror for a long time. I was still me, still here, still breathing. In the morning, I told Ray about the John Doe. I did not tell him about the resemblance. I wanted to see what happened without my input. Ray called me at home that afternoon. He said the body in Unit 12 was gone, not transferred, not picked up, gone. The unit was empty. The body bag was still there, unzipped, flat on the tray, but the body was gone. Security footage showed nothing. The log showed no access after my shift ended. Ray asked if I was sure I'd put a body in there. I said yes. He asked if maybe I'd been tired, confused. I said no. He filed a report. The police came. They found no evidence of entry, no evidence of tampering. The transport manifest I'd signed was real, but the hospital had no record of any DOA matching that description. Parker Road had no reported incidents that night. The watch is still in my dresser drawer. I haven't worn mine since that night. I can't, because the one I took from the body and the one I took off my own wrist, I put them side by side when I got home. They had the same scratch pattern on the face, the same tiny nick on the band where I caught it on a filing cabinet 2 months earlier. They were the same watch, not identical, the same, down to the microscopic level as far as I could tell. I work day shift now. I requested the transfer the following week, and my supervisor didn't ask questions. I think Ray told her something. Every night before I go to sleep, I check the dresser drawer. Both watches are still there, both still keeping time, and every morning one of them is exactly 4 minutes ahead of the other. A different one each day, like they're taking turns. Some people ask me if I still work at the morgue. I do. I don't know why. Maybe it's because leaving would mean admitting that what I saw was real, that it all happened the way I remember. Maybe staying is easier than that. Or maybe I just want to be there if it happens again. Not because I want answers, but because I'm afraid of what happens if no one's watching.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.